Do you mind
And
if I fix this really quick?
sure.
Because you're looking like you're in a horror movie.
Yeah, I really am. Um, is the exposure what's
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Watch out, viewers. We just had a jump cut here.
Jump cut. They're like, whoa, why is it so
Whoa!
bright and the camera's slightly shifted down? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Long Form Conversations, the podcast where we talk about long form improv. I am your host, David, and I just want to say thank you all so much for listening. For the next couple of podcasts, I want to let you know I'm going to be doing them all ahead of time because of the holiday season, so they might be a little out of sync. I may be getting some folks in November, and they're going to say things like Happy New Year or Merry whatever, and then it's going to be out of sync. So just so you know, this may not be time accurate. But that's with that out of the way. Let's go ahead and get started. Really excited to have today's guest on with us today. She is a talented improviser, filmmaker, writer, editor, cartoonist, director. Oh, anything creative she can do, baby. This is Erin Smith.
Hello. Yeah. Give me the nouns, you know?
Give you all the nouns.
Yeah.
Cinematographer.
I'm really don't identify as a cinematographer, but you know
You're
what?
you're a director of photography person.
No.
I don't prefer that. It's a French term. I'm an American DP.
I can visualize the shots I want, but I'm like, let me have someone who knows the technology well enough to get that for me, you know?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
something that I wish people would talk about more is how technical
Oh,
being a DP is. It's all science.
it's every like film job is about the technical like equipment with which you're working. It's like, of course, we can all like think about how we'd want lighting to look, but
Yeah.
it's about the practical
How do you achieve
experience.
it?
Yeah, and knowing not only like knowing how to use the tools, knowing what the tools are,
Mhm.
and then also like having the experience. So you're like, well, I know it's going to go wrong. If you put that on there, it's going to catch on fire. So,
I remember in film school there was this like page or this diagram for cinematography, and it was just talking about like the depth of field, and if
mhm,
you want the subject to be this big and you want the background to be that big,
yeah,
there was like a math equation with like
yeah,
trigonometry to be like, if you
yeah.
want that, show that, you have to do that. And I was just like, wow, who does that,
Well, that's like the first day C's like get it pulling that or that's like focus pullers,
Yeah,
like
you have to like measure the
having to and
distance.
then being able to eyeball that of like what will be in focus. Yeah, and that's like technical stuff that
And that's when
like
I was like, okay, I'll do directing, because I'm just gonna say I want him here and I want the moon behind him. You make it work.
I want the moon. Okay, we
I
got
want
our
the moon.
moon guy.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
gotta
that's
get a
kind
moon
of the
guy.
fun part of directing is that you're kind of like, I did all this like thinking about this, and then you're
Yeah.
kind of like standing there and all the little people are running around and doing it.
Yeah, you're at craft. You're just eating
Well,
cheese, waiting for them to finish.
am I gonna eat cheese? Gonna be farting the whole day all over the set.
But it's your set. That's the best part. You're the director.
Yeah.
You're the
So it's
top.
my scent. However, I
So
want this set to smell, I can.
that's the power of being a director, baby.
Yeah.
Uh, um, I saw you a bunch this weekend for Halloween. Saw you a bunch of
Yes.
Halloween
Lots
stuff.
of Halloween parties.
Yeah. So this is period accurate. This is coming out
Yes. If you
tomorrow.
guys want to know, it is 2 days before Hallows Eve
Yeah.
or one day.
One day
One
before
day
Halloween.
before. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I loved your costume.
Thank you. Did you recognize it?
Yeah. Well, the second time. The second time I had to.
You recognize it from the party before?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay, I guess that counts.
Yeah.
I like to dress as someone who is like just in regular clothes, like from a movie. So
Mhm.
this time I dressed as Annie Brackett, who is Laurie's friend in Halloween, the Carpenter one, who she's the one who spills butter on herself midway through the movie and then like changes into a large man's shirt and like has yellow socks and puts a blanket over her shoulders and then is killed by Michael Myers in a car in the garage. Um, so I did blood and like a
The
prosthetic
scar, which is
cut.
great.
Yeah. which was helpful because if I had not, people definitely would have just been like risky business. Like, people are they are seeking like the simplest explanation
The
for
lowest
Halloween
common
costumes.
denominator.
And I would like in high school, like there was one year where my mom said, I will pay you $50 if anyone can guess what your costume is. And my costume was the lead character from a book called The Boy Detective Fails. And of course no one guessed it, but
Dressed
then
like the cover art or based on the
no, the cover
descriptions?
does not
Okay.
show this character.
Yeah.
It was like based on the descriptions, he like really loved like this blue sweater he wore, and he
Yeah.
had like a tie with an owl on it, and like he had like a lot of like medications he carried around.
And to be
And
honest, this is maybe more about me than about other people. But when I read a book and I get to the description of what they look like, it goes in one eye and out the other. Like
in the eye,
I
okay,
don't remember
yeah.
it, like I zone out and I just skip right past it. So even if I had read that book, maybe if I just read the book like
Mm-hmm.
earlier that afternoon, I would not peg it. I would be like, oh yeah, I guess he does wear that shirt, doesn't he?
Well, do you feel that in your brain you can visualize things
Yeah.
vividly? Okay, you can.
Like I like it better. Like I read Harry Potter before I saw the movies, of course, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like glasses, lightning bolt, red hair, frizzy Hermione. But I wonder how much of that was from the cover art and how much of that was my
Yeah.
imagination.
So I don't visualize things in vivid detail in my head.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like my dreams are a little, they're sort of like out of focus and more just the idea of the things. So like when reading a book, I'm not like, okay, in the scene, blue sweater, check, tie, check. Like that would be a lot of mental work to
Yeah.
do that. But yeah, so I'm not like seeing this. I'm not seeing a movie in my head as crisp as a
You're seeing like
movie.
stick figures.
No, they're not stick.
That
See,
was a
that's
crude.
see, that's something people have said before when I've described the sort of like less than vivid
Mhm.
visualizing, but I'm like, why would it go to stick figures?
Just to
Like,
say extreme.
yeah, it's
No, you're
more.
seeing like amorphous shapes.
No, it's not that. I think it might also have to do with like having glasses where it's just kind of like out of focus.
Got it.
And it's, yeah. And I was thinking about that recently of people talking about like having night terrors and like how you wake up and it's like you think you are in your room, you think you are awake, but you can't move your body. And then you'll see like a demonic force comes in on your chest. And I'm like, I've never had a night terror. But then I was thinking, like, oh, but if I had one, I would be like, if it was in focus enough for me to see what's
Yeah.
happening, I would be like, this is a dream. Like, why would I have my glasses on while I'm asleep?
You
Like, I
might have
can't.
had night terrors and it's just all really blurry and like out
Yeah.
of and like you can't really hear much.
Well, I can still hear, but
Yeah.
I also I kind of like lucidly dream, just in that I always kind of I know deep down I'm in a dream.
But like you ever been in that state where you're awake but you can't move your body?
No, I've
Okay.
never had that lucid dreaming sensation. I tend to not get scared from scary
I was just gonna
movies.
say, you seem
Yeah.
like you're a big horror movie person, right?
Like recently, just because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I guess like I've embraced them in the past couple
Yeah.
years, but it's like, oh, they're where people are sort of exploring mental illness. Yeah.
That's always like a underlying theme, I feel like.
Yeah. And also just that that's where horror comes from. Like either it comes from someone is mentally ill and like their brain makes them see things that disturb them, or it's someone who doesn't have that interpreting events that people have done in life because they have that.
Yeah.
So it's them like taking murderers and stuff, which I assume something's wrong with the brain,
Yeah.
and then writing a version of that. So it's like we have the like two different types of
Yeah.
horror.
Or it's a giant shark attacking a peaceful beach town.
Yeah, well, but that shark is really battling with depression.
You're
So
right. I didn't think about that. Sorry, that
yeah,
was
come
so
on.
insensitive.
You know,
Bruce is going through
Bruce
some
is
stuff.
going through a lot,
They're
okay?
unstable.
Amityville is changing, okay?
Yeah.
Bruce, when Bruce was growing up, just a young shark, those beaches were free of the tourists,
I heard his parents abandoned him at birth.
Yeah. Yeah, they
Wow.
did.
How about that?
Yeah, they did.
So
But
I think it's interesting because there are some people, the most of the people I know that like love horror, they either like I don't know. I guess it was. I was gonna say it sounds less profound when I say it out loud. It's like
Mhm.
they either loved it as a kid or they never watched it as a kid. But
I
that's
never really did,
yeah,
but it
because you
was
don't get traumatized by it. I think. Whereas I grew up like watching
speak
it.
for yourself, dude.
Well, maybe I don't know. I think, but when
Yeah.
you're a kid, I think you don't have the mental tools or the emotional tools to self regulate. I
Hmm.
remember like watching like Jace, all the
Yeah.
big horror things, not understanding, just being like really scared and really panicked, and it got so bad where I couldn't be in a room by myself.
Yeah.
I'd always have to like bug my parents or bug my brother
Yeah.
because I was like, but if I'm by myself, Freddy Krueger's gonna claw at me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that exists
Mm.
without horror movies though.
Okay.
You know?
That means your brain is good. You have good brain. If your brain's not already making up scenarios like that without like Wes Craven
Yeah.
inventing them for you, that means you got a good brain. You got perfect brain.
So you're
Um,
saying, but I don't. Do you think kids should have that paranoia or have that anxiety?
I don't know. I mean, I also like did watch some horror movies
Yeah.
as like when I was like 4, I saw the end of Child's Play 2,
Mhm.
and it's when like Chucky gets
He
melted.
got the knife in his hand.
Well, I just saw him getting like melted,
Uh
and I
huh.
was so disturbed by this image that I stopped eating macaroni and cheese
Ah,
because it like is the same kind of texture as that. And like still to this day, I will be repulsed by foods that are like that color and texture. Like there is a like a like basic just sort of like repulsion to it that I cannot get rid of. And I also have a repulsion to a certain shade of purple
yeah.
because there was a monster in an episode of this show, um uh the Ghost Writer.
I know exactly what you're talking about. The
Yes,
little
the
doll with
purple
the little gum.
monster.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and I was so like I'm like I don't even really remember what that monster did, but I was like so repulsed by it that like there's a car in my neighborhood that is that color, and I'm like I
Gross
like get
car.
grossed out by it
Yeah.
when it drives around.
Well, then there
Where
you go. Like, don't you wish that we had a childhood where you could see that shade of purple and eat mac and cheese? I would have loved to have been in my room by myself. I tell you that
yeah,
much.
oh, of course I would love to have had a trauma-free childhood.
Ow, it was good catching up.
Good catching up. I hope all you listeners out there got your little notebooks out. You're writing down these movies to watch.
Yeah, and
Um,
when you make your horror movie, invite us to the test screening. We got
yeah,
some notes.
yeah. I'll need a couple extra pages on that comment card.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and jump into our first segment now, which is gonna be Improvster Syndrome. This is your opportunity to talk us through your journey through improv and talk about how you felt through it and throw in some of that trauma. Throw in some of let's
Throw in some
build
of
that
that
into our
trauma.
podcast
That's good.
language.
That's
How
good.
you were feeling.
That's the thread here
That's the
is
thread.
trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, trauma dump Monday. Um, yeah, so I started doing improv when I was 20. Um, I like it with this. So okay, so I had done stand up once before I did improv, but it was like a really weird situation where like a professor I had a crush on in college was doing a like work in progress festival, and then I was like, wouldn't it be kind of funny if I like did stand up at this? So I like did stand up, but I did like 15 minutes.
50, 50?
15,
Oh,
but
15.
like for a first ever
Yeah,
set
yeah,
of
yeah.
stand up. And then the then I like remember going to an improv show and being like, I could do that, where you're like, I'm funnier than that.
Okay, set the scene real quick. Where are we?
This was in Iowa City, Iowa,
Iowa
which
City,
I went
Iowa.
to for a year and a half and then transferred to University of Washington.
Okay, so this was in a college in Iowa,
Yes, University of Iowa.
and you grew up there.
No,
Okay,
I'm from Seattle area.
so this is like your chance to. Did you like go to college trying to make a new identity, or were you always like funny and into like performing?
So I mean, thank you to presume that I'm funny and into performing.
I don't need to presume it, baby. I've seen it.
Whoa, baby.
I keep saying baby. I'm sorry. I don't
Yes.
know why.
Okay.
I'm just
Um,
thinking about
we're here, we're
one day,
babies.
baby.
One day.
Yeah, baby fever.
Yeah.
Puffing season for me. It's baby season.
Yeah. Um, I I don't know because like my friends were not interested in like performing, and like I think they did think like my high school friends, and I'm like they did think I was funny, but they also would like make fun of me for like trying to be funny.
Mm.
Like I remember they would say like Erin's hit rate is 1 out of 100 for jokes, which is so
Those are really bad friends.
yeah. So I did not do comedy in high school, though at one point a like like an acquaintance kind of new friend like told me, she was like, I heard a rumor that you're actually really funny. So like I was not class
No, but
clown.
do you think your friends secretly, she's so funny
No,
that we
my
can't let her think
friends,
that?
my
Well, here's a
friends,
new friend. Just so you know, Erin's funny, but we don't tell her.
well, that was like my one group of friends, but like other friends, yes, it was like me making them laugh was how I would become friends with them. But I was like very quiet in a lot of classes. So only like in like French class, I was like making jokes, because you're like,
That's the language of comedy, baby.
well, well, it's because you have to be like being creative,
Yeah.
because you're just
Mhm.
writing sentences. So it's like, why not make them jokes? So I remember like one year, all my sentences would be about Michael Cera. um, but then in college, then I transferred to University of Washington,
Wait,
and
I'm sorry. How did the stand-up show go in Iowa?
it like went well, you
Did your
know.
professor impressed?
I think so.
Hell yeah.
But yeah. Um, I did end up using one of joke from that when I then did stand up, which was it was like I wish I could get like a sugar daddy. Like I don't want to do any of the like sexual stuff with him. So I guess I just want a real dad. So I'm like, that's the joke I did the first time I ever did stand up. Um, and then I like was very depressed and dropped out of University of Iowa. It was like I went home for winter break and then just like didn't go back,
Mhm.
left my apartment there, and then ended up going and getting my stuff like in a 2 months later. Um,
Oh, so you just skipped, like
skip town.
skip town.
Well, like I had to like
Did you bring a jacket at least?
I had like my suitcase, and of course it was filled with all my DVDs
Got it.
because my
Couldn't trust your roommate.
no, and I was living alone sophomore year, but my mentally ill brain was like, you got to bring all your movies with you. What if you want to watch all of Freaks and Geeks over winter break?
What if someone breaks in and scratches all of your
See, it
DVDs?
wasn't a fear that someone would break them. It was that, what if I need to watch this?
Gotcha.
But
At any
then
given
once
time.
like
This was a
this was
pre-Netflix.
pre Netflix, and but like once I like, and I did torrent stuff, but like then that gave me like peace of like,
Were you under the age of 18 when you did this?
yeah, I was when I
Okay,
torrented.
great. Don't need to edit that out.
I was only doing it under the age of 18.
That's right. Once you turn 18, we all deleted our
I
torrents.
deleted all those
Yep.
files. Um, and then I like didn't go back to school, had to like go fax my like dropout to the school,
Mm-hmm.
like go find somewhere that had a fax machine, was very depressed. And I ended up then going to University of Washington in the fall. Like I transferred there, but was very depressed for 6 months, living at my mom's house. And I was just like doing yard work in her yard. And then I started listening to Comedy Bang Bang. And I,
Interesting.
and this was in 2011, very depressed. And I was like, kind of like, this will save me.
Yeah.
I'm like Joan of Arc, like looking up at God. And I'm like, and then, I'm doing,
Well, Joan of Arc was mentally ill.
hey, I'm not saying I'm not. And then I like had to convince my dad to like give me enough money to like take an improv class.
Okay.
And then I did in Seattle at Jet City Improv.
So this was outside. This was I don't know Jet City Improv. So but that's like an improv theater.
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's like there were two main improv theaters in Seattle, which were Jet City Improv and Unexpected Productions. I never did Unexpected Productions, but I know people who did. And their theater was at the Gum Wall. And
Oh.
then Jet City Improv, their theater is in the U District in Seattle, but the classes were like in this building, the Armory, which is right next to the Space Needle. So when I was taking these
Oh.
classes, imagine me, 20
Landmarks.
years old, taking the bus to
Yeah.
take these classes. So I like started taking improv, and like I took 101, and you know, like it, I know people talk about like UCB 101 of like, oh, it's so like freeing or whatever, which I didn't feel doing that, but I was like, I can do this. And
Yeah.
like, it was more like 201 where I remember being like, I'm like funny doing this.
Yeah, let's talk about 101 for a sec.
Yeah.
So
So I was like 20 years old,
this
and
theater, was it short form, long form, or how did they structure it?
so it was like their all their shows were short form, but the classes we would do long form.
Okay.
And then our class shows it would then be like we're doing short form with, and so it was so frustrating because
Mhm.
I'm like,
You're not learning what you're trying to do.
yeah, and like we would like in the classes it would be like we'd kind of use as editing devices like short form things. Like we would kind of be like cut to 10 years later, you know, which like kind of is like a short form gamey stuff.
Mhm.
Like this scene we're going to like keep cutting further in the future or whatever.
Yeah.
But we were essentially just doing long form, and it was so frustrating because then I did like try out for their team eventually, and I like was like I got to go to a show beforehand, and like I a friend went with me,
Mhm.
and just going I was like I hate this. I hate watching this.
I want to be one of
And I'm
them.
like, well, I need to be up there. And of course I like didn't really do that great in the audition, you know, it was first time auditioning for
Sure.
anything. But also like I would hate doing that because
And
that's yeah.
so when you went into your first class, like obviously a very cinematic person, obviously very creative, but how was it like coming out of your shell kind of, and kind of like, you're gonna give who what, and they're gonna give a where, and you're
Yeah.
gonna give a
I
why.
always like, I actually like, well, first of all, I'll paint the scene that for most of my improv classes in Seattle, almost I'm like 20 and it's all these like men in their like mid 30s who are like, you know, being like, oh, I'm a software developer. I want to like take an improv class, get better at meetings.
I work at Microsoft. I
Yeah.
work at Seattle's Best Coffee.
The two stores in Seattle.
Amazon.
Amazon was not there yet.
Oh,
Um,
scandalous.
and so then also like we would like go out after the classes, but like we couldn't go to a bar because I was too young. So we'd like have to go to like a Thai restaurant.
They're like, no, we're gonna get Patsy you.
um and yeah, so it like never I never found like my people in those classes, which kind of sucked because I did really like doing improv. And that's why I then did do stand up.
But you did enjoy your first class. Like you liked the
Yes.
whole.
And I feel like I always, in like classes and stuff in school, like when there's a performative element, I always enjoyed that.
Mhm.
And like in like, it would to the degree that like in English class, if we're like reading a play, the teacher would be like, Erin, you're going to like read this part.
Yeah.
And like, but I had convinced myself that I could not do theater because, well, one thing was when I was in middle school, we only did plays every other year. And so it was when I was in seventh grade.
Budget cut.
I'm like, I don't even know. I was in like a rich area.
Yeah.
And so I was in the play in seventh grade, and like I wasn't a lead, but I was like a named character who like I actually was on stage for the whole show because I was like it was set at a restaurant and I was like the waitress. So I had to be like walking around doing stuff the whole time. But
Nice.
then we didn't have a play when I was in eighth grade. So I like lost that confidence to do it in high school. And then
Yeah.
also
Why couldn't you have been a sixth, eighth kid instead of
I
just a
know.
seventh
It
kid?
all would have been so different. And then also like I had a friend who like did community theater stuff, and I
Mhm.
kind of was like, well, that's her thing. That's Caitlin's thing.
And you can't do what
I
Caitlin
can't do what
does.
Caitlin does. We all have to be different in our interests
Yeah.
because you know we're like the characters in like Totally Spies, or we get one of each.
Yeah. You're
Yeah.
the artistic one, I guess. All right.
Yes. Yes. I'm the nerd one. I'm the suicidal one. And I think I also was just like, I mean, also it was frustrating. My high school was very much like, oh, in order to be like leads in the plays, you had to be in like, be very much a theater kid. And I just didn't have time because I did like orchestra and then choir. But then I also did at the end, like kept trying to get into this video production class, those two periods, but they kept like not putting me in it. So it was like I had these other, you know, and I had a lot of stuff going on.
That's like LA. You got to make it your whole life or you're not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. And
Oh,
I'm like, I regret that of like, you know, high school theater, like if you're in a good department, you are learning all these skills and stuff. And like I never did that. So I've done one play in my life.
But you got a lot of stage time.
I got a lot of stage time, got a big laugh.
So after the 101, you decided to stop and go to do stand up instead?
No, I like kept doing the classes throughout then college. Like I don't, the levels were like weird and they kept like renaming them.
This is 201. This is B.
Yes, there was a point where I'm in like, you're in 303B. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And like, and finally, like, there was like a sort of capstone one where they did make us do like an audition to get into the class, but it was like they let everybody in. And like, we had more of like a long form show. But then like the teacher made us put short form things in the middle. And I was like really mad about that. But
So you do not like short form.
no, it's just not, well, we'll get into it when we're talking about our rants.
Yeah.
It's prescribing a game onto something. And it's like, that's not improv. Improv is creating something from nothing and finding what is fun. And the joy of that moment propels you forward. And if you're saying before you set out to do it, like, what's going to be funny as we act like we're in a soap opera, it's like, that's just, improvising a sketch that is inherently boring because we already know what the game of the sketch is. Is that it's improvising a hacky sketch. But then it more why I didn't keep doing improv in Seattle was because there wasn't really an indie scene. It was like really weird, the indie scene. I mean, first of all, it was all my compatriots were like men in their 30s and I'm like 22. And and then like some people in this final class were like, let's start a team. But like one of them was a man who made me uncomfortable. So I like quit. I did not have the wherewithal to be like, hey, what if we don't have him on the team? Because he makes me feel uncomfortable. Instead, it was like I recused myself. But then it also was like the thing that people would do if they wanted an improv show was you would like rent out a theater and do an hour-long show with your team. There was not the like indie infrastructure of like, let's do our 12-minute sets.
And then let's like split the time with other
Yes,
teams.
no. And so it was like, okay, we're gonna rent a theater for, however much that'll be. And then
invite our friends
to watch us for an hour perform, which it's like, that is not a good method. And so then I tried out for like the University of Washington improv team and like did not make it through the second round of callbacks, which I'd still say it was because of my scene partner, because I initiated a scene where I was a priest and he kept making jokes that I was a pedophile and I was saying like no to that. And I think the judging people were like, she's saying no, that's not good improv.
Yeah.
But like now
we love a good pedophile scene.
Yes. And like
because
now
we're the UW improv school.
I mean, like now I would probably label myself as the pedophile, but also I could like deal with that. I would just be like, like, yes, I fuck kids, but we're here to talk about you and how you swore at your mom or like whatever. Like I have the
savviness
to like navigate something like that, of being like, okay, that's not what we want to talk about. So like, and that's not, it's more to me, it's actually, that's not funny. So like, let's move around that. But I like did not have that at the time to successfully extricate myself from an unfunny quagmire some lame man is trying to put my character in. But then at that audition, I like met a friend who was like interested in doing stand up, and then we like started doing open mics together. And I had like a high school friend had done like one open mic and I'd like gone and watched it when I was in high school. But then to me, like my like friends I then met doing stand up, those are like my like college friends. Like it's not like from classes or dorms or whatever. It's like from doing stand up when I was in college. And like like Tyler Schnupp, like I met him then. And
like, he's from Seattle?
Yeah. And like, cool. Well, he lived there at that point. and Brent
Oh,
Flyberg.
he lived there and he didn't. Okay.
Yeah. And Milan Patel, he's like now still doing stand up. Vange Spracklin, like Jack Watt, like those were like my
Shout out Jack Watt.
that was my little crew. And you know, we like hosted shows and stuff. Yeah, we had a show called Steve Pool Comedy Hour. And I guess if are we taking too long here if we want to transition into our rants?
No,
Or
no, no,
what
we're
more
not.
questions do you have?
Well, we're still
Oh, I
you
haven't
in
even gotten to
Seattle.
UCB. Yeah.
Yeah. So how long were you doing this in Seattle? I think you mentioned like about 2 years of improv.
So I did the improv for like 2 years from like 20 to
22.
22, 20. Yeah. And then the last improv class I took there was I was taking a musical improv class.
Oh.
And then, you know, I also was dealing with personal stuff, but the teacher at one point, like I had said I did stand up, and he seemed to really dislike that. Like he seemed to have the mental thing of like, well, stand-ups come in with their shtick and can't do improv. And he then told me that he told me, have you ever heard of the phrase bag of tricks? So rude. And then he told me that
That's not a good teacher.
no. And then he told me like, you are always playing creepy characters, which to his credit, he was onto something. That's what I want to play. But also I was like, with the musical improv we were doing, the pianist like starts playing and then you start singing. And I was like, they're playing like minor chord creepy songs. What am I supposed to I was like, am I supposed to be playing this like happy character to
Yeah.
that kind of music? And then I remember like the last one I did, he was like, okay, and in this set, Erin, you have to play a princess who just wants to get find a husband. And like I was at that point, you know, like just graduated, like doing all this like feminist film criticism. Like I could not compute how to do that in a satirical way of like,
Yeah, it's also not improv to prescribe
yes, it's not.
a who
And
and a what.
yes. And so I like remember like being very frustrated by that. Whereas today I would like easily I want to play people whose values are the opposite of mine
Yeah.
as a way to like satirize that. And like I'm playing lots of women who are just like, I need to find a man to satisfy. And but like I was not able to compute doing that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point. And so that was the last improv class I took in Seattle, and then was doing stand up, and then like kind of started having like panic attacks and was doing less stand up, and then moved to LA to pursue film and like editing. And I like signed up for UCB 101. So I moved here, you know, gained my residency in December 2016. And I signed up for like a 101 intensive with Brandon Gardner. But I had so much anxiety about going to the class that I like dropped after like 2 days.
Yeah.
And it wasn't doing the class. Cause like in the class I was fine. And the people in the class were like, oh, you've probably done improv before. Like you seem to like know how to do this. It is just like the act of like going to the room, you know, and like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Classrooms are intimidating for yeah.
yeah. And just like, and then also because someone was like, oh, I think you're good. Suddenly I have so much pressure on myself of like, I must be the best one in the class. And I'm, you know, I
I have to
must,
live up to that person's.
yes, yes. And to my own expectation, which is never even what an ideal student would be. It has to be like somehow I'm like, you know, this teacher's pet level where I'm like, I have my own rubric I've created that's more rigorous than what the class requires. Yeah. So then I like dropped out of that first class, and then, you know, was kind of floundering around. And then Tyler Schnupp, he wanted to do the 101 intensive as well. And he came and visited in like March, April of 2017. And then we did the intensive together. And it was with Paul Welsh as the teacher.
And did
And
you feel like that helps, like doing it with a friend?
I
Like,
guess because of accountability,
mhm.
like I couldn't like not go because he is staying on my couch, you know. If I was like, I'm not gonna go today, you know, like that's not excusable. And then you kind of reach that uh like point of no departure in a class where it would be like more strange if I dropped out, you
Mhm.
know?
And did you take to it well having had 2 years experience? Because I know that you said it was like weird and different, like how they taught things up there. But did
It
you?
did help because, you know, just like having done it, then it's not weird to just be speaking extemporaneously. And also, like, perhaps I am just well suited to pretending I'm a person and just like saying whatever they think. But yes, having done some of it, it's like, you know, the act of doing it is not what's hard, you know. It's like, oh, it's not that I've never walked before. It's that I
You
like,
like walk a certain way now.
yes, I was wearing different shoes before, but like I know this is possible and what you could do. Yeah.
Yeah.
It did definitely help. And like, you know, I felt a little like I got a leg up in this
Yeah.
one in the 101 class because like, you know, I'd done some of these like exercises and stuff. Like I'd done a scene before.
Yeah. And other people are
Um,
just like,
yeah. The like prescriptive UCB style game it really got me in my head for a while. And so I went, yeah. And in 301, I met like Mai and Ivan, and like we had our first indie team together, Trapper Keeper. No, no, not Emily.
Mhm.
And then, um, and I had never done a indie show until when I was in 401. Somebody in my class was like, "Oh, do you want to sub on a show?" And like that was my first like clubhouse show. And like it was, you know, easy and funny. But it was like, even with Maya and Ivan, we like did practices for like months before we ever did a show because we were so nervous about
Yeah.
the idea of a show. When really it's like, no, that's where you actually learn your craft.
Mhm.
Like, practices are good for like team chemistry, but you do not learn how to be a performer by performing for one person in a living room. You have to learn that like on a stage with at least, you know, a couple people there.
Yeah. Other improvisers waiting for their turn to perform.
Yes. Um, and then, you know, Trapper Keeper, we started doing lots of shows and, you know, to be like, and then before the pandemic, it was the point of like, oh, almost every day a week doing a show. And that was like right before the pandemic, it was like prime, like it was a bunch of like mashups, like nobody had teams anymore. And like, and I was on Mess Hall in 2019 and yeah,
Bug juice.
bug juice.
How was that? Let's talk
Um,
about bug juice.
at that point though, like I was so in my head with the like the style of doing premise improv where you're supposed to, you know, in the first line have who, what, where, first game move, justification, like that's improvised sketch writing. And like that got me so in my head that I would on the back line, like I would be like writing like, you know, like in order to test whether a premise could function, I would write like 4 game moves on the back line.
Mhm.
And then that's what the scenes would end up being. And so that's not improv, that's not listening. And that's like so rapid fire, just like da 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 da. And like that,
I think it's important to say that one more time. Just I think a lot of people enter premise improv with that in mind because everybody overthinks it. That's exactly
yeah,
what being in your head is like, is when you think, does this scene work? I don't know. Let me think of the first
yes,
unusual. Let me think of the second. Let me think of ways that I can expand this game. So if this is
yeah,
true, right? If I'm eating dogs, what else am I eating or whatever,
yeah. But
So
then
like,
you're not doing improv because you will, even if you're trying to be present in the scene, you're kind of like, how can I work in the game move I already
right.
invented?
And if your scene partner for some reason does not get it, like that's also fair game because what they say now, if they
Yeah,
label you something different or if they give
then
you
that's true.
a different
Yeah.
stimulus, you need to take that stimulus and make it
Yes.
work.
And like I think that, and at the time I would like ask coaches and stuff of like, well, how much pre-planning do you do? Like how do you
Mhm.
test whether it's going to work? And they would kind of be like, I don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, you just like get to where you know if it's going to work. And I feel like somehow taking a break from premise improv entirely during the pandemic, because I did like Zoom improv, and then with we opening up was doing in person improv in like 2021. having that break, it like freed me where I'm like not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And like to me with premise like, and I was very against any premise improv for a while because I was like, that's just improvised sketch writing. You're supposed to come up with the game of the scene and then like just be like writing the beats in the moment. But now I'm like, okay, no, that's just the starting point, and like it can go completely differently. But I try to approach premise improv with like, okay, if is it an opinion my character has, um if it is, like, that's more actionable because that can just be, I can play a person who is like this. And then also, but if it's, and also try to tie an emotion or a physicality to that.
Yeah.
But if it's not an opinion, if it's just something that has happened, then I have to have like a strong emotional or some sort of physicality tied to it, or else it's completely unsustainable and it becomes a scene where you're just like, well, I did one thing. What were we talking about?
Just like where you are now at your improv journey. It sounds like you
Yeah.
have come into yourself as a improviser.
Yeah. And feeling, yeah. And like being, and also, there's also just trusting scene partners is so important in improv, in that for me, it's like not about like, oh, I'm going to depend on them so that I don't have to like do something because I'm nervous or whatever. It's being like, well, I don't feel like I have to do all the work of the scene because I trust whatever they give me, like, is good too. And like, that's what I struggle with, is like giving up that control and being like, I'm going to give the space for my scene partner because I'm not too scared that what if it's, and of course, whatever anyone else says is always 1,000 times better than whatever thing I say, because what I say is through my brain and it's not that surprising. And if they say anything else, it's like, this is so much better because now I can take that, interpret it through my lens, give it back to them, they interpret it. And it's like playing, like mind meld, where it's like, we're going to get so much further away if we have each other. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
It's not fun to play with yourself.
And it's not fun to
Yeah.
masturbation joke.
Yeah.
It's not fun to have to think 4 games at. Now you can just think 1 game at a time, which is much more
Yeah.
freeing, much more relaxed. And we can see it. You can see if someone's in the back line making all the moves, and versus someone who's just listening and being like, now I can jump in.
Yeah. Well, and also like I do just go, when the flow state, I am in total freak mode and I'm just like, I'm not doing any pre-planning.
Which
I'm
is
just,
where you want to be.
I'm being this person.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is how this freak would react. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Erin, thanks so much for talking to us about your improv journey. Really glad to hear you take us through that. And we're going to go ahead and jump into our next section. But before we do that, jump cut or jump scare. We're well lit now. Okay, we're going to go ahead and jump into our next section, which is going to be our topic of the week. Now, I figured you'd be a great person to go with this topic because you do a lot of different indie teams, and one of the great things about indie teams is you get to pick your own form.
Yes.
Now, I don't know how it's gone for you. So our topic is going to be choosing the right form for your team.
Yes.
In the past, whenever I've had this topic come up, I'm usually in the back line. I'm usually just like, yeah, whatever you guys want. I'm fine with whatever.
Okay.
I feel comfortable with whatever. But I do notice that it can get a little heated. So I want to hear about your approach.
So I'm actually, real hot take on this is that I don't think any improv set should have a prescribed form before it starts. I think that forms are for practices, and they are teaching you what choices are available in improv. They're teaching you about what types of edits there are. They're teaching you how sets feel. But if you're doing organic improv or like even premise improv, like that first scene is what determines everything. And like, you need to listen to the scene and listen to the form. And like certain teams, it's just the chemistry of the people and how their brains work will gravitate towards different forms.
Yeah.
But I think that it is so limiting that people put forms onto sets before they've happened.
Sure.
Because it's like, to me, like, I think of like the first scene is the base scene, or you can have a series of like throwaway scenes before you get to the base scene. And the base scene is like the first scene where there's something you want to explore here. And it's like sometimes like you like, and if you stay in that scene for like, you reach, there's that capacity you reach where it's like, this is a mono scene set. And I'll see people like do sets where it's like, this is a mono scene. And then we get an edit, and then we get the weird, like 3-minute other scene at the
Yeah.
end where it's like, no, you have to listen to the set. Or like you might have a scene where it like organically becomes like a pretty flower. Like there's only certain types of edits and moves possible in improv.
Yeah.
And like once you learn them all, I think that deciding the form beforehand is very limiting because of it is forcing you to make choices that maybe don't fit, but it's also like keeping you from making choices that might fit better.
That's a really good point. Like, I always talk about form or think about form is just like how does your whole set or how your scenes connect, or how do you get from one to the other?
Yeah.
And really, if you are comfortable with all the moves, you should be able to make all the moves and understand when you would want to employ them or when you're not.
Yeah.
So in that sense, like the less rules you have, the more it's like a montage, and the more it's like, look, if we want to tag, we're going to tag. If we're going to edit, if the scene is asking for us to edit,
Yeah.
we'll edit. But if it's not, let's stay in here.
Yeah. And I think also like saying montage has become like a pejorative. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, let's just use that as like movies as improv sets that are not following this exact structure. Because sometimes you will do, like I have done with like my Wii Team Wild Child, like we kind of ended up doing mono scenes, but that was because we found ourselves gravitating towards that. But we had several like forms that we found ourselves doing, which like one of them was like flip flop, which was flipping between two locations or like 2 or 3 scenes, flipping around between them.
It's like a dual scene.
They're not a split screen. Like the edits, like it was like it would be
Like we're a hotel staff, and then we are in a guest hotel room.
like
Hotel
it
staff.
could be like macro sceney in that way, but
Mhm.
not prescriptive in that it has to be in the same location.
Sure.
Like it just felt right. Like it was like, okay, we've done a scene of these two people, and then we did this scene, and that's like enough. And like once you flip back, it's like we have filled up like the shelf. Like, you think of like the improv scene as like you are the first couple scenes, you're like filling up the shelf of like the world. And then if you put too much stuff, it's like you can't do the surprising but inevitable because there's too much stuff there. So we can't track everything. But if you've just the right amount, then it's like you can pull any of those things and it feels good because like we remember them all, but also there's enough that it's not like, well, of course it's that thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's maybe so how have you done it? Have you just gone montage, and as you do it a couple of times you start to realize like what this team's chemistry or
What
dynamic
I
works
think like
best?
is best is to actually in practices do forms, like go through and see like what do we like, do a slacker, do a pretty flower, do an evente, do all these forms to see what the possibilities are. It's like with, I feel like with like screenwriting, it's like you watch movies and you see what's possible. And but like when it comes down to it with improv, like there's only a couple things, that the ways we can edit are like linear and non-linear. Like a linear edit is like a normal sort of tag of like follow a character, we're moving forward in time. This is like how novels work, where subsequent chapters we assume time has passed and like we are moving forward linearly. Then there's non-linear edits, which are often like pretty flower ones of like we're maybe jumping to the past, maybe we're jumping to other people analogously. And I feel like generally in a set it will only be either linear edits or non-linear edits.
Yeah.
Or else it feels there's like this wonkiness that you start to feel in the set and you're like, why does this feel bad?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think similar to having a team that has the same sense of humor, you also need the same sense of like, if you want to call that like a
Style.
narrative or style or structure or
Yeah.
whatever. Because I was on a team one time that like wanted to do a pretty flower, but that
Yeah.
skill set of I heard something funny, I want to take
Yeah.
us to that. That's a muscle that not everybody necessarily has.
Yeah.
So you can really make half your team feel alienated or left
Yes.
out by doing that. Conversely, with the mono scene, I think some people, they love the patience, they love that whole 15-minute one
Yeah.
act play, but there's some people that are just ripping and rearing to go, and
Yes.
that can also be really like create a lot of friction if one person
Yes.
is trying to
Well,
like
and
go
that's
slow
where
or
it's like both. That's where like in the practices you like learn the team chemistry and you're like, well, maybe this is a team where monoscene is not good for us because we want to like because people are saying things that are so funny that and we want to like cut to that.
yeah, you want to heighten it, you
Yes,
want to
you
blow it
want to
out.
heighten in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, maybe you're in a team like if you're doing like it should never be that you're like doing a slacker and you're all like, fuck, what do we got to do? It's like that is not the form for you. Like
Yeah,
the
it's that
form,
trust.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
dude, with us, any two people, trust me, we're gonna have someone to
yeah,
cut
the
to.
form should be serving the set. You should
Yeah.
not be serving the form.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's where like Harold is such a bizarre form because it's like no one would organically accidentally do a Harold.
Yeah.
And with all the other forms, pretty much these are things that you can accidentally that you come to doing.
Yeah.
And like maybe they're not like the perfect version of that because often you take a few scenes to get to the meaty base scene. And I call the scenes before that like throwaway scenes because you're like, this scene like isn't really this is not what it's going to be what our set is about. Let's just like tag out of here or let's do a sweep and like see if we can get a scene that could be a pretty flower base or could be a mono scene or could start a slack or yeah. And Harold is like because it's like I do see like organically coming to where like a sort of flip flop where you're like, okay, we have like three scenes and then that's enough and we want to return to those. But I'm like, this is such a weird structure. It's so bizarre. And so it like feels satisfying when it is done well, but that's rarely and it's hard. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, to bring up the Herald is a good example or a good idea. Sometimes what some people do need structure for, and I think this is what the Herald does a really good job of, is it really does give everybody a job in a
Yes.
sense. So it really balances it out. And if you're on an
Yes.
indie team, I can imagine that could be an issue. That's something that never really gets said out loud, where it's just like, hey, this is like you three doing every single scene that we're
Yeah.
not doing.
Yes. You feel safe of like, okay, and my beat is I'm the second scene. But at the same time, that also I think not on like a really like good gelled team that's doing heralds, but like that also leads to that sort of like lack of taking responsibility for the other seeds in the herald
Yeah.
where you're like, well, that's their scene. When it's like,
Yeah.
no, the whole set is all of ours.
Yeah. To have that team voice, that team ownership is
Yeah.
like you mentioned, like it takes a lot of time to develop and a lot of trust. And that's something that
Yeah.
maybe that's why classrooms and that's why house teams, it's like, no, we don't have time to develop it. Here's
Yeah.
a built-in structure. But if you're giving any team, you have a chance to feel each other out. You
Yeah.
should practice together for a while before you decide on how you want to like.
Yeah. And like doing shows is good, of course, before you're like a great team.
Yeah.
You got to be working, you have to be walking around before you can run the freaking race, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah. Also, I just feel like it's so like we rolled past our hot takes part, but what I was gonna say is like what
Oh, we're still gonna do them.
okay.
We'll still do them.
Well, what frustrates me is like I think that UCB game is a very useful language to describe the mechanics internally in an improv scene of like that's us all like tacitly saying this is the funny thing, let's use this until it no longer serves us, this is what the scene's going to be about for a while. But I feel like I see like teams who are like trained in game using that, but it's something that never sparked joy in anyone. It's like not something that was funny to anyone, and then just like trying to have that be the game of the scene is this. And it's like, no, like the game playing doing game moves is like volleyball, like doing like a rally with your teammates. But it's like if you miss the ball, then you're not like that's not a volley, you are just you have to hit the ball first. And like I think that learning game structure has made people like hang on to something that's not serving them.
Yeah. It's a
It's
tool for collaboration, a tool for
yeah.
teamwork. But if you're gonna not do it in the efforts of teamwork,
Well,
I
it's
agree. It
more
gets
yeah.
competitive, or it's like, what are you doing trying to spike your own teammate, your teammate?
Yeah.
You
But
want
it's
to,
also
you
that
know,
it's like if it like, you're doing premise, if you start the scene and if the game is not working, then that is not the game of the scene.
right.
Like you are going you it has to be something that is discovered and that is funny to you. And I feel like I will see compulsive gameplay where and I am too much on the other end where I'm like, "Oh, I'm bored of this now." And then my like character just like brings up like, "Oh, actually, you know what? My dick's on fire right now," and like that's when I end up just saying absurd, strange
Mm-hmm.
things. But if if you're getting bored in a scene, that's not a bad thing. That just means the scene needs to change.
Right. And again, now to like bring it back to the idea of like finding forms and finding what your team's,
Yeah.
can we call it like an attention span, it's like,
Yeah.
or whatever, but like what their focus is. So you might like this because I think you'd love flow charts. I made a flow chart. I don't have it ready, but I'm
Hmm.
gonna make it and I'll post it. But it's like a nice little flow chart of like deciding different forms. And
Yeah.
of
And I've
course,
of course also made a chart before.
yeah, of course, yeah. You're a very big charty person.
I'm actually not a charity person, but I
I've seen
did
you make
make
so many
one.
diagrams and so many
Oh, for my Emily show?
yeah. I assume that that's what you're doing all day long. That's just for the
No,
show.
that's just for the show.
Okay. Well, it starts off with it's long form, short form. I'm just kidding.
Hmm.
Well, there, but then it's gonna be organic or premise, because premise now involves an opening, and there's also some forms you can't do with organic, or excuse me, with premise.
Yeah.
Like you can't do a pretty flower premise because you only it's all about how many times you initiate. So
Yes.
montage or Armando or whatever, you can initiate multiple times, so you
Yeah.
can pull multiple premises. But if you're gonna do a pretty flower or a slacker, you pull one premise, and after that,
Yeah.
you
And
discover
I
everything
think
else.
you could with a team do premise based in those forms and it would be that it informs the world
Mm-hmm.
and like what is possible for these characters to run into later. It is an entirely different use of premise.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, kind of the whole thing about having restrictions, what you're right about is you could technically do that, but then you'd have to just play around with the rules of this world. A
Yeah.
good example is when someone does premise with mono scenes. You can do that. I've seen people do it, but it
Yeah.
involves a lot more maybe entering and exiting and using those as initiations. So if you
Yeah.
do a slacker and you want to do premise, you will just need to introduce a lot more walk-ons so that people can introduce a new
Yes.
pull or new game.
Yeah. Yes. Though also like monoscene should also continuously have the interplay between the games of the different people in the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, if we want to get real derelict about it, yeah, like
Hmm.
there's really no reason why we have to stick to any of these preformed forms. These are just things that people have done, tried and true, and it's really simple. It's
Yes.
just like, hey, no edits, so you can only tag and walk on.
Yes.
That's a simple
Yes.
restriction.
It becomes doing like Campbell, like this story structure,
Yeah.
where to me, I'm like, no, that is an analysis of the way that stories have been successfully
Mm-hmm.
told. And this is saying like here is like data on stories that have worked on us and the way they were organized.
Yeah.
But like just following that is not going to make a satisfying story because with all art, the form and the content like they must be in love with each other and like
Wow, romantic.
yes, romantic. But like they are so linked and like deciding the form beforehand or saying like these are the only forms possible, like that is not gonna feel satisfying to you, the artist, or to the audience perceiving it.
Yeah, and like I haven't tested this myself, but like there are certain conventions that have been tested for years before. So like the fact that every single montage is really just one game, and the fact that you kind of need to edit before you play the next game, I don't know if that's always going to be the case. I've never tested it out where we'll play a game for a little bit and then we just tag into a new game.
Yeah,
Sometimes
well,
it does work, sometimes it doesn't
yeah.
work, and
I
it's
mean, that's what I do because I also am so bored. I'm also so bored by like
yeah,
tag runs of like we get it. I
yeah,
get what this guy's gonna do.
hmm
Like you set it up. You did a good job. You set
yeah.
it up. Now let's find the next
Play
funny
into
thing.
this, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like standard convention, or if you want to stick to the pre-cut cookie cutter forms or whatever, that would
Yeah.
dictate that you edit and then you start a new scene, you find the next
Yes.
game. But there's no reason why you can't play around with it. So I'd say that's more advanced. If you're still starting off new,
Yeah.
I'm of the mind of like, when you're learning anything new, if you're like starting a new indie team with your friends or your classmates, you start with the most amount of restrictions, and you want to slowly peel back. You start to realize like what you want to use, you know? So if you do
Yeah.
just like a strict mono scene, let's all do mono scenes. So we're only allowed to do, walk-ons and walk-offs.
Yes. Well, I'd say like you do that to learn
To
the
learn.
tools that are
Yes. Not to say
available.
that you have to do that for a show, but in
Yes.
practice,
Because also like you're not if you do not do these forms, you'd never if
build
you
the
do like
muscles.
evente,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a weird form where there's like an event, you do like the first scene is like a big group scene of like an event is happening, and then you cut to scenes of like those characters like lives before the event happened.
Yeah.
And then the final scene is we do the event scene again, but it's now informed by all the things we learned about the people. So it's
Yeah.
like
It's like a short
now,
formy
well,
a little bit.
yeah, but it's like now it's like the dream of like, it's like we dreamt the first one and now like here's what really happened. But like, you know, that could be something you organically get to in a scene in a set is redoing a scene earlier and having it be different because
Yep.
reality is interpreted
And
differently.
it could just be like you take an existing form, and like I bet you the person that found or discovered that event, I mean I
Yeah.
can't bet because it's a dumb,
Yeah.
but like how much you want to bet that was like a pretty flower at first, where it was all just flashbacks, and they just realized like, it'd be a good way to end it all off is if we jump back to that base scene together,
Yeah.
but we play all our games now,
Yeah.
you
Or,
know, or a
or
montage
something. Yeah.
or whatever,
But like so like anyone could come up with any of these forms, but what's important is doing them with your team because then you together know you all have the language of these types of edits you can
Yes.
do.
And
And
yeah,
because then you like learning about game, we have that tacit, like unspoken, we know what's happening.
yeah.
So that when you do a tag, your teammates sound like, what the fuck did you just do?
Mhm.
Why did you go to me?
Yeah.
Like, there is language to it that, like film, it's like, like in early film, there like weren't edits and like they're, like
Or they did them in
supposedly,
camera edits like you had to
yeah.
do.
Well, supposedly like the first edit is this movie of like someone holding a cat and then we like cut to a close up of the cat. Um and and like a lot of like early film like they hadn't learned about like um sort of like linear progression of time like what's that called where like there's like a famous short like the famously like there was this short film about like a fire is happening and like a lot of early films would sort of like show a scene and then we'd cut to a scene of other people but it would be starting at the same time the other one did so sort
Yeah.
of like tracers that improv form
Yeah.
and like it took like someone doing like oh no the time could have passed for these other people
Real time. Yeah.
too in order and then we watch that and then audiences are like well now I know what that means
Yeah. Yeah. It's
and
it's just the relationship between two separate sequences and how your brain
yes
connects
tracks
them.
them and like
And that's very much what a tag can be. Because if it wasn't
yes
for that, you could just be like, are these new people? But your brain is
yes
just like, no, no, because they touched that
yes
person's
that's
gone
the
now.
connective thread
Yeah. And this
yes
person is here. So
yeah
yeah, like your brain naturally does. I mean, I don't know because I don't remember my first time watching improv. Maybe it confused the hell
yeah
out of
maybe
me.
you freak the fuck
I was like,
out
I don't understand where that was my friend. Why is my friend off stage now?
yeah
But in a sense, like that's all it really is a way to string together
cross
different
cutting that's
ideas,
what that's
cross
called
cutting different things. across having different games or different
Yeah.
characters or whatever. This is so interesting. To talk improv with the filmmaker, you know,
To talk improv with a pretentious freak.
yeah.
Yeah. But I
This would be a
think,
completely different conversation, I bet, if I was talking to an actor or a playwright or you know what I mean, like a
yes, because
theater
there's
person.
different
Tastes.
media
Mm-hmm.
like has different conventions. And improv has its own, you know, because the conventions of the form are based around what is physically
Yeah.
possible, you know, like yes, like in a play, like you think about like M is like a famous film, like the Fritz Lang film, and like it has a shot, so it's like about like a child kidnapper, and there is a famously like a shot of just a chair, an empty chair, and that conveys to us in that moment the child was supposed to be sitting here. But you could not do that in a play because, you know, you could put a spotlight on the chair, I suppose, but you cannot like direct the audience's eyes to like this chair is now what's important. Like plays are not about absence, they're about like people saying things and discussing things. And like with a film, no, because you have that control over explicitly what they're seeing, you can cut to a close up of nothing and have that mean everything. And yeah, different art is different and it's not all the same. And that's what I get very frustrated because we're in the era of like, oh, I love this character that like originated in like a comic book and like people I
Let's
just
take him out of the comic book and put him in the video game. Let's take him
I
out of the video game and put him in the movie. It's
I
almost
just get so frustrated because I'm
yeah.
like when someone's like, I love Batman. I'm like, well, but you also loved whatever media you saw it in.
Yeah.
And like it is so dismissive of like the art itself.
Right. To think that the IP rules all.
Yes,
Because
when
Lego
it's
Batman sucked.
well, because like I also
Sorry,
like
Lego
I
Batman.
really liked the Batman,
Yeah.
and that was because of like the filmmaking in that film.
Yeah.
And like I think that I don't know, we're in this time where like we're like taking characters out of the art they come from. And it's like, no, the art ends when the movie ends when it ends, and the characters don't exist outside of that art. They are the frames we see.
Yeah.
And like I don't know. I'm very into like medium specificity. And I'm like,
Sure. Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
are if you are doing a painting, let's play with what a painting can be. If you're
Yeah.
doing improv, let's play with what improv can be. Yeah.
I love that. So improv being a specific stage medium, a specific comedy medium,
Yes.
art medium.
So first of all, as you said, comedy medium, it should be funny.
Yeah. Yeah. This ain't improvised Agatha Christie. I don't know. But you take that idea and you take your because it's also a collaborative art form. You
Yes.
take everybody's relationship to this art and what type of art they want to create. And then from there, you should determine what you can do, what you can't do, how the
Yes.
scene should relate to one another. And that'll kind of help give you your form.
Yes.
But if you're starting off,
Yes. If you're
do a
starting off, like
montage,
I'd say like you have
learn them
to
all.
because you have to also like just get comfortable with yourself on stage,
Mhm.
get comfortable with like trusting what you can do, trusting what audiences like you to do.
Yeah.
Like I know certain things audiences don't like when I do that. So I'm like, okay, I'm
You
not
gotta
going to
stop
do
those
that.
Trump impressions. It's been 3 years.
They're eerily too good.
Yeah.
It scares the audience. But actually that is a thing where sometimes people who are too if you're like good at singing, people don't want to see someone good at singing in improv. You
That's
have
right.
to do your improv singing, which is like slightly bad singing because it's like Brechtian, like it breaks the scene when someone's like too good at singing or accents or whatever.
It's like that thing in the Prestige where you had to show the little trap door because if it's too good or too real, it'll break people's minds.
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't know if I quite agree with that. I don't remember this moment in the Prestige, but
You know when they're doing the teleporting man, the real
yeah.
teleporting man. One of the guys, one of the producers, okay, but you have to do a little trap door because people are gonna freak out if you don't
Okay,
have that
in the movie they're
in the
saying that.
movie.
Yeah. Well, like, do you know like Bertolt Brecht?
Yes, and a Brechtian break. I understand breaking the fourth
Yes.
wall, and I agree with that as well. But I don't know if the line is good singing, but In any case, I agree
Well,
that I don't want to see a good singer sing.
yes, in improv.
Yeah.
Because it is,
I didn't pay
yes.
for tickets, so I feel like I'm cheating you of your
I
concert.
think it makes us like think too much about it's just not funny, is why I
Yeah,
don't
you're
like it.
you're now seeing an actor or a singer in this case.
Yes.
You're seeing like,
And you're
oh brother, this
thinking,
is not a concert.
yeah, well, you're thinking like, great, they think they're so good. And it's like, you don't want people to be thinking that about you in improv.
Yeah.
You want them to be on your side. So you have to be like,
That's
yeah,
exactly why I do a little bit of bad acting. Because if I do too good, they're like, oh,
yeah.
what
I
is
don't
Michael
know that,
Caine doing on
yeah,
stage?
I don't think that the acting people are mad about being too good. That character, it seemed too much like they were it.
Yeah.
I lost my mind. I'd walk out.
Any
Yeah.
closing thoughts on choosing the right form?
Um, yeah, I guess just like try them out. It might surprise you
Hmm.
because and it might surprise you what works for a certain team
Yeah.
because it can be like in different combinations of people, somehow something else is what feels right. And it's not what you expected.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to end. I know this is like our big topic. I just want to end with like, don't take it too seriously. Like your team is gonna do great with whatever form, you know.
I don't know
Don't
if I
be
agree with that. My
well.
advice,
I was like, don't be the. I have don't be the person that's gonna be like, well, I just do not want to be a slacker when everybody else
yes,
wants to be a
yes. And
slacker.
that's fear based. That's
Yeah,
someone who's like, I did a bad one once. And it's like,
yeah.
well, yes, maybe this is not, maybe tags aren't your thing,
I just
but
hate the living room. Everyone does the living room. I don't want to do a living
yeah. But
room.
also, and also quit if you're not funny. If you're not funny, just go do a painting.
All right, great closing statement
Uh-huh.
about choosing the right form. All right, it's time for the last segment you've been waiting for. You've all been waiting for. It's gonna be our hot improv takes. You've been throwing out a lot
I
of
feel like
different
I
hot
already
takes.
said
Yeah,
mine.
but here's your dedicated one. So you have a moment now to rant about a improv trend that you want to see more of, less of, what you think is just fine. You want to keep it the way it is.
I mean, I already went deep on this, but really it is
Okay,
indie
say
sets,
say hot improv take.
hot improv take. Do not do compulsive gameplay in, especially in your indie sets. If you are like doing a game and you guys do not find it funny, I guarantee you the audience does not either. So y'all got to move on, either edit or only the game has to be something that you like. It is not going to be something that you find boring or confusing. Like that's not the game. That is, you're just doing a boring and confusing scene. So stop, cut it out. I hate when you see the compulsiveness of like,
Right.
let's do another one. And it's like, we all are trapped and we hate being here.
Yeah.
So
Do you watch
improv
The
should be
Office?
fun.
You watch The
I've
Office?
seen The Office,
It reminds me of
yes.
the episode where the GPS is telling Michael to turn into the river.
Yes,
And it's
that's what
because
it's like.
yeah.
It is like compulsively being like, I must, the game's leading me to the river. I guess I gotta go there.
Yeah.
And it's like, buddy, it was already funny, whatever Rainn Wilson said in the car. Follow that.
Yeah.
And also, like, follow the dang funny. I don't think I think that's not stressed enough in classes because they are being taught by, they want money. So like we can't say like the goal is to be funny when that is the goal because some people taking the classes will not be funny. But hopefully on your teams, they're not with unfunny people. And you can be friends with people who are not good at improv.
It's
They
also
can be,
subjective. Like
yes, it's
someone
subjective, but
you have to find your teammates
yes.
funny.
Yes, you should find your teammates funny. You should not be dreading being in a scene with one of your teammates. But
Yeah.
also it's like the most important thing is that like you guys are finding it funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like if you don't find something funny, simply do not play that game. It's as easy as that, folks. Just do something else.
You solved it.
Yeah.
You figured it out.
Just have your guy open a cupboard and be like, ah, fuck, I left my dog in here for 6 months. And that's, again, maybe it's not good to have a dead dog in your set, but hey, it's something new, something to talk
Yeah.
about.
I have a really similar one, but at the risk of I don't know how I want to say this. Okay, I'm just gonna go for
Okay,
it.
go for it. Hot take. You have to say
Okay,
it in one sentence. Get
hot.
your who, what, where in there too.
Yeah, yeah. Let me drop this clean premise
Mhm.
initiation. All right. Hot improv take. Like, rest the game. It's not always gonna be your game. Every line out of your mouth isn't always gonna be the joke. There's a lot of things going on. Even if you are gonna be compulsively playing the game, even if your game is funny, even if it's hitting. In fact, especially when that game is hot and everybody's loving it and they're like, I can't wait for them to do it again. Like, resist the urge. I nothing breaks me, nothing breaks me out of a scene more when the only thing coming out of your mouth is game moves,
Yeah.
right? So if your game is let's pick one from earlier. I'm a woman looking for a husband. If
Yeah.
every line is looking for a husband, of course it's funny. Of course that's what we expect you to do. You're doing exactly as instructed, but you're not being a human being in the world.
Yes.
So if someone asks you, "Can I get you more sugar?" Don't be like, "Sugar only from my husband." Like, relax. Ask for the sugar. Take the sugar. Stir it into your tea.
You'll find a way to make it funny.
In fact,
Trust yourself.
it'll make you look so much better if you don't take the easy low hanging fruit, if you don't take that short form punchline, right? The low hanging fruit,
Yeah.
and you move on. So after we get the sugar and the tea, what's next? We're gonna maybe, I don't know, get some biscuits, then find a way to make biscuits.
See, I mean,
You know,
I kind of disagree in that I don't think you should be again like trying and being like, now I'm gonna do the game move.
sure.
It's all about trusting your scene partners. It's really on resting the game is really on the person who's like the voice of reason being an active
Mhm.
character. And if your scene has become so wonky that the only thing interesting is this repeatable game
Right.
behavior, then of course it's going to become like, okay, well, I if we do anything, we're just waiting for the another game move.
And I
But
think that's
like,
what I mean.
yeah,
That's what happens when like you only do that. It makes everything else kind of
flat.
flat. So I guess maybe a better way of saying this hot improv take is play the base reality, make that base reality
Yes.
good, invest in it. So that way, even the unusual person can be like, dude, I'm kind of out of moves, but luckily we have this rich,
Yes.
textured base reality that we can like lean into. I can play the base reality some more, and then when I find like have an organic, natural way to bring up the game again, I'll pounce on it. Other than that, though, we could do the rest
Yeah.
of the base reality and it'd be great.
Yes. And you're as the like voice of reason character, like you think you're the main character. And and it's
You're
that,
Kramer, baby.
yeah. Well, yeah. And
Bad,
it
bad
is,
example.
well, and it's hard because like, but it depends who you're playing with. And like, I have the issue where I will just, if you give me the space, every one of my characters will turn into an absolute freak. But and I need to like work on that of tempering myself, but it also has to do about knowing your teammates and stuff. And like
Yeah.
your voice of reason should be interesting, just maybe, but then we also have whatever that game thing is. And like that's what makes it pop is that other
Yeah.
stuff is going on.
I kind of agree with that. And this is kind of my little shame on some voice reasons out there. Because I agree, the voice reason is the main character. And when the voice reason, I've hated when they see another thing that really breaks a scene for me is when the voice reason is just looking at the
Yes.
unusual person or throwing them things to make that game
No,
move.
don't try to play for them, play
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah.
You guys are playing volleyball together.
You're the main character. So, like, hey, great, you're doing that. You're looking for a husband. Terrific. But we have a pickleball tournament. You got to practice
Yeah.
and really make it about your base reality, get invested and really try to. I mean, that's the whole tug of war kind of thing. Like, you kind of need to make the focus on you so that whenever we're not expecting it, when we're not looking at the
Yeah.
unusual person, when they pop that game move, it makes it so much funnier.
Yeah. And also just be funny.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to just being funny. I
Just
can't
be
stress that enough.
funny.
If you're not
No
funny,
one's going to be
quit.
mad if your scene was funny if it wasn't perfect. Because what's perfect is being funny.
All these notes, by the way, all these hot improv takes, it's just only matters if you're not funny.
If you're not, yeah, if you're
Yeah.
funny, you can do whatever the fuck you want up there.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And if okay, I'm gonna leave it there.
You're going to leave it there.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you're funny but you're bad, they're just gonna move you to a different team.
Yeah. Hey, if the institutions aren't cutting people, then it's fine. It's fine to be predator.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's
Okay.
Let's
We're
go ahead.
calling back to how I saw Horatio Sands
Yes.
perform when I was in high school.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you so much. There's nothing else to do except for your plug. So
Plugs.
plug away. Plug, plug, plug.
So you can follow me, I guess, on Instagram at Erin 09. Yeah, it's a pun on a Finnish word. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes. ERINONAINEN. It's a pun on Erin. Erinomainen means excellent in Finnish. Nainen means woman, and my name's Erin, so it's like a great pun there.
If you
Um,
speak Finnish.
if you speak Finnish. And from there you can get my like I'll be plugging when I have shows. I'm on this team Toretto. We host a show for Weegis every other Tuesday tonight or tomorrow night, in fact. I'm at the Broadwater. And I host a clubhouse show, Emily. It's every first Thursday at 9:30 p.m. I make an insane game for each of
They're
them.
all so fun and so great. When you
Thank
get a chance to
you.
talk about your crafts.
I like craft a weird thing for each show. My team Wild Child is We Team, and then also yeah, you can all I post about shows. They're also all on my website. If you go to erinkelly.com, there is a page where I link to my Google Calendar that has all my improv shows.
Add that calendar
And
to your
add that
subscribe to it.
calendar, subscribe. I'm pretty sure no one has ever been to that page, but you know, it shows that it's there. And then also I have been posting comics lately on Instagram at comics by Erin. And you know, they're the same kind of freaks as I play at improv. So if you enjoy those, you'll
Some more of it.
get some more, but with a little drawing of like somebody crying. All right. I guess that's all for now. But log on those places to learn about more stuff about me and what I do.
Yeah. And I'll put all those links, including the Google Calendar, in the description.
I gotta get more hits on my website.
All right. Well, thanks so much for stopping by, talking to us about your improv journey, and giving us a breakdown on how to choose the right form.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, the sun's down. We're gonna go and sign off now.
Sayonara, sickos.
Sayonara, sickos. Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. Oh, great.
Okay. Maybe a
Ooh.
little too hot takey, but
No.